There is no red, white, or blue in this country. The only color that matters is green, because we live in the United Corporations of America. Hey there, Jordan Chariton, live, Status Coup. It is Monday, February the 3rd, the year 2025 in the United Corporations of America. And today really solidified that we are literally being run by multi-billion-dollar corporate conglomerates purchasing politicians and leaving innocent people to basically just fucking die. Excuse my French. Yep. And joining me now are some of those innocent people. Chrissy Ferguson, a resident of East Palestine, Ohio. Unfortunately, your home is right over a contaminated creek that is still contaminated, despite the bullshit that the vice president spewed today. Lori O'Connell, you live just over the border in Darlington, Pennsylvania, with your husband. Yes. Sadly, he got double breast cancer very soon after this derailment and chemical detonation. And we'll talk about how he's doing. I wanted to have you guys on. Today is the second anniversary of the East Palestine derailment, which, of course, is not limited to just East Palestine. The media frames it as uses the term derailment, but it's really not a derailment as much as a chemical nuking. It wasn't just a derailment. It was then days later, so February 6th, they decided, in my view, criminally, Norfolk Southern, that is, to unnecessarily detonate. They had over 1 million pounds of vinyl chloride they were carrying on that train. We since learned there were electric cars on that train, lithium-ion batteries. We've seen in Piqua, Ohio. Now we're seeing in Northern California, which Status Coup is on the ground now. We'll be probably live tomorrow. Tina, my colleague, is there with the lithium battery plant fire. So in East Palestine, you had the vinyl chloride, which that became many other things. You have dioxins, which are lethal, very, very toxic, has literally caused the clearing out of towns in American history, dioxin contamination. So we know this happened because of Norfolk Southern, and we know Biden was the president. Understandably so, a lot of residents, if you don't have hope, what do you have? A lot of residents I spoke to were hoping under President Trump and now Vice President Vance, Senator Vance being, your senator when this happened, that maybe, more would be done. A lot of residents I spoke to were hoping. It was announced that Vice President Vance would be visiting East Palestine today to mark this anniversary. They were hoping that he would invoke the Stafford Act, which would allow for East Palestine to be declared a disaster. To be clear, places like East Palestine have not been declared a disaster. Neither was Flint, Michigan. And why issuing a state of emergency is not the same thing as a disaster. An emergency declaration is basically you're going to get resources from the state, mostly. A disaster declaration, the federal government essentially takes over. You could have FEMA in there. You could have the Army Corps of Engineers and a lot more resources. So I'm sorry to put you through this, but I want to play a few clips from our vice president. And I think this is a larger lesson, MAGA, if you're watching, and I'm not chiding anyone from East Palestine. I don't care how you voted. I don't care if you're conservative. But I think a lot of people wrongly, I'm talking if you're on the blue team or the red team, Democrats or Republicans, wrongly think, oh, it'll be better under a Republican or it'll be better under a Democrat. I hope today shows you they're all going to fuck you. Yep. JD Vance went down there after this. He did some photo ops by the creeks. He claimed, he was going to try to help the residents. He talked about health issues at the beginning. Well, that was today was quite the different tune from Vice President Vance. I'm going to play clips and then want your response. And I'm sorry, because I know this is triggering. And by the way, they didn't have residents standing behind him. They had politicians. Very few of the actual residents with health problems were allowed in there. Colin, whatever order you have, let's
there
start.
Were none.
Good afternoon. It's good to be with everybody. It's great to be back in East Palestine. As a lot of you know, one of the first real crises that we confronted when I was United States Senator for the great state of Ohio was the train derailment in East Palestine. And there are a few reasons why I want to come back, of course, on the second anniversary of the disaster. I think the first is just a signal to the people here in East Palestine that we will not forget you. I talked to the president about this visit a couple of days ago. The president loves this community. Of course, he visited himself personally. And President Trump just wanted to deliver a message that this community will not be forgotten, will not be left behind, and we are in it for the long haul in East Palestine. What does that mean? Well, one thing it means is that, of course, the environmental cleanup has to get done. It's a tragedy and a shame that it wasn't done during the last administration, but I guarantee we're going to finish the cleanup during this administration under the great leadership of Lee Zeldin, our new EP administrator who stands behind me. And I also think that part of that means the long-term economic development of this community. We know that a lot of local businesses and a lot of local people lost a lot when that train disaster happened a couple of years ago. We are committed not just to finishing the environmental side of the cleanup, but hopefully seeing East Palestine build back better and stronger and more prosperous than it was before this disaster happened in the first place. That's not going to happen overnight, of course. I'm a realist about this, but I just want the people to know here that President Trump, me, and the entire administration are committed to ensuring that the people of East Palestine, that their community, their government does right by them, and we'll keep on working at it in the months and the years.
So that was his first clip. Within a minute, I heard about economic development. We won't forget you, yet there's, as far as I can tell, no residents there. And I didn't hear anything. And we'll play more clips about the fact that 2 years later, I mean, I have a partial list here. I'll just run through some of it and then get your thoughts. I didn't hear a damn thing about people having bloody noses still. I didn't hear anything about the headaches. I didn't hear anything about chemical burns inside people's mouths, on their lips, people still suffering with migraines, fatigue, women having irregular menstrual cycles, young girls having premature menstrual cycles. An alarming increase in people developing dementia under the age of 60. Increases in cancer. We will get to that. Lori, your husband. Seizures, strokes, kidney issues. I mean, I could go down the list. There was barely a mention that there is widespread health issues in East Palestine and Western Pennsylvania. I'll start with you, Chrissy, because you can't even go in your house still. It's over that contaminated creek.
No, and on December 30th, there was a knock at the door. Norfolk Southern has ended our relocation. They're okay with us going back to our home. We have till February 28th before we could possibly be homeless, because I am not taking my family back to that home and watch my family die because of the contamination in that home.
And
Vice President Vance he spoke about meeting me at the gas station that I worked at and my home sitting on top of Sulphur Run. We were silenced once again, just like when President Biden came. To our mayor, I hoped and I prayed that you would speak for everyone. I understand that if you're not sick and not having health symptoms, you don't want to leave your town. I didn't want to leave my town. I didn't pick this. I didn't do this. This was Norfolk's gift that keeps giving to everyone. I pray you do not ever be able to understand what the sick are going through. I pray that you live a long, healthy life, but you are the mayor for everyone, and you did not speak for everyone. That's very disappointing. Now, also, Vice President Vance, you remembered me. You spoke to me. Why did you not get in touch with me? Why did you not let residents in to whoever, whether it was Governor DeWine, sorry, whether it was his call, the mayor's call, the vice president's call, once again, doesn't matter red or blue, they all see green. Nobody spoke about Norfolk's dirty little secrets. And those of us that are having health issues, those of us that their homes are not safe to ever live in again, we've become their dirty little secrets, and you're not making it better. You're keeping us a secret and keeping us silent. And shame on you. Shame on all of you. You will answer one day. I'm praying for you because I am so disappointed and so fed up with the cover-up that keeps going and going and going.
I have that clip we'll play in a minute, but I want to ask Lori. You live just a few miles over the border. Your husband was diagnosed with double breast cancer, I believe, like 18 weeks after this.
Yes.
A couple weeks before this, he got a clean scan. So something happened between his clean scan and double breast cancer.
Yes.
I met and interviewed Wayne. Had a fighting spirit, but this has a way of wearing you down and making you very disillusioned and losing hope. And unfortunately, from what you tell me, he was in remediation, but now that cancer has spread.
Yes. It last year, when they did blood work, his antigen kept coming back, doubling every 3 months. In December, when we saw the oncologist, it was at 100. She immediately ordered a PET scan, and she said, go home and pray that it's inflammation. Unfortunately, his PET scan has showed that it's metastasized to bone, and we think lymph nodes. We're waiting on a call for another biopsy to see what we're dealing with. And it's the nightmare that doesn't end. And I wish that they would have taken the time to talk to the residents. My own community, my own government locally put out a letter today about the 2nd anniversary and how they're still fighting for us, and they're still fighting for clean water, and they're still fighting for, us to be safe. But all the preliminary tests have come back that everything is fine. Okay. I had the EPA out here to test my water and my soil. And yes, they indeed told me it was fine. But I don't know how it was fine because we were still getting sick. And so we had
We'll see if her connection comes back. Let me ask you, Chrissy, because it seemed to me, well, you know what? Actually, let's play the next. Oh, there you are. Did we lose you? Okay. It seems to me that he wanted to give off this impression that we're not going to forget you.
Right.
Oh, sorry, we lost your connection for a minute. So you're waiting for a call.
Yeah, we're waiting for a call for a biopsy. Wayne has all but given up. He has all but given up. He thought that when this administration took over, when we heard that, Vice President Vance was coming, that there was that little last glimmer of hope. We don't even have that now. We don't have it. I'm going to lose my husband. And they don't care. It was a photo op. They came in for a complete photo op. They talk about the businesses. I can't go to East Palestine. What I have right now is the result of being there 3 weeks ago. And I was there too long, and I immediately got sick. I got sick that day, and it just got worse the next day. And I haven't been able to get rid of it yet. Nobody else in my house is sick now. I'm the only one who's sick. I was there this morning briefly, and I came home and had a migraine, or not a migraine, but I had a terrible headache. This all started again, and now I'm right back to where I was 3 weeks ago.
And yet they tell you, and Vance said it today, we'll show you, the air is fine, the water's fine, the soil, even though I've exposed that they hid from you that they detected vinyl chloride. They didn't notify the public.
No.
Yet it's all in people's heads, and they'd say, well, we can't draw, direct cause and effect. Well, why do people have bloody noses? Why is a 60-something-year-old man getting double breast cancer, which is extremely rare in men?
Wayne has had shortness of breath since the end of 2023. I took him last week for a pulmonology test. Took him to see a pulmonologist on Friday. They cannot figure out where this is coming from. He's been to a cardiologist. He's been to a pulmonologist. We've been to a psychiatrist. We've been to other doctors, and nobody can, in all of their testing, all of their examining him, can explain that. I can explain it, because when you go to so many visits and the answer is always the same, there's only one thing that changed in our lives. We've lived in our home for 26 years. Only one thing changed. And that was that fateful night 2 years ago. And then when they made the decision to blow up those tankers. And that altered our lives forever.
Our lives are derailed. Everything else is back to normal, but the ones suffering the most.
Yes.
And I just want to explain for the audience, this is what I've learned, and I'm certainly no chemist, but why it's very clear that either the EPA and the state officials are either incompetent in their testing or just straight up lying. And I think they're just straight up lying, because this is not my first rodeo. Yeah. They lied to the people of Flint, and they've lied in many other instances. The EPA, when they blew up those cars of toxic chemicals, it's not like that plume just stops at an invisible wall in the air. It travels.
I froze.
As toxicologists I've spoken to, the plume went to as many as 8 states and Canada. So Lori, where you live, right over the border in Pennsylvania, that plume went right over your house too. And the EPA, they're only testing for individual chemicals. Yes. They're not testing for what they call synergistic toxicity. Synergistic toxicity is humans being exposed to a chemical petri dish all at once. Not just vinyl chloride, but when vinyl chloride is released into the air, it turns into formaldehyde, hydrochloric acid, carbon dioxide. Then you have the dioxins, which we've talked about, which Times Beach, Missouri, back in the 80s was evacuated. It's a ghost town now because it had a dioxin disaster, the EPA wouldn't even test for dioxins in the beginning. They were forced and shamed to test for dioxins. And what do you know? Independent testers, not on the payroll, found very high levels. So when the EPA says we're not detecting vinyl chloride or we're detecting low levels under human health, well, 2 + 2 = 4. People, this is not one mass psychosis of psychosomatic symptoms. Your mind doesn't cause a bloody nose. Your mind doesn't cause cancer. Your mind doesn't cause, I mean, we'll show the clip later. We're talking 7, 8-year-old girls are having menstrual cycles.
Yes.
Boys, you know, as young as 7, 8, 9, 10, full chests of hair. So I want to get across that when JD Vance stands up there and, well, let's play some more clips to get their response, because he just pretended that everything's fine. The air is fine. The water's fine. And he didn't even mention residents' health problems. Let's play another
I came
one
here
now.
a couple years ago. I talked to people on the ground. It was kind of crazy. The first person I met was at a gas station. We had to stop and get gas. And I asked her what was going on. And I expected her just to be, you know, it's a small town, but it's not that small of a town. I expected her to be a person who was just generally aware of what was going on. And she actually was living in a house that was over one of the creeks where she was smelling the fumes coming into her house. And I realized that, you know, the most important part sometimes of being a leader is just listening to the people who are on the ground and experiencing this. And that's what I've tried to do. As the governor said, that's what I try to do, talking to local businesses, because it is different now, right? In that initial phase, what we were most worried about is the water clean to drink? Is the air safe to breathe? That's what we were really worried about 2 years ago. Now what we're worried about is finishing the cleanup and getting this community back on the path of economic prosperity.
So that gas station woman that he was talking about is Chrissy Ferguson here.
Mhm.
And again, with the economic development,
Yeah.
didn't mention that home. I mean, I was there last year, even standing on the porch with you. My eyes were burning. The chemicals are so bad. We went inside the home. I think we lasted like a minute before I said, I can't, it smells too bad.
Mhm.
So he's talking about you. He's talking about you, but he's not talking with you. He's not talking with the residents. And again, I've heard economic development twice now, but nothing about the health.
I would like to have seen him go into my home today. I think if you're really wanting to help, then walk into that home and open up a tote. Go down into the basement and check the drain that the creek water seeps up through. Go in my deceased father's room so you can have the eyes burning, because each room in that house gives a different symptom. And to overlook everything that I have fought for and that my fellow warriors, as I call them, have fought for all along, why would you not, if you're going to bring me up, why would you not follow up with me? Why are you focusing on just everything's clean and pristine in Palestine? You know, come stay at Lori's house. Come stay at mine. Come stay at Ashley's. Let's go visit where Jamie used to live. I mean, hey, we could even go over to Chris's. You could bring your children there and watch them start puberty very quickly. You're a father. You're a husband. Bring your kids.
Yeah.
Bring your family. Bring your loved
Let them
ones.
play in the creek.
And yeah. And let them skip rocks over the rainbow sheen on Sulphur Run. Have picnic lunches. I'm fed up with being silenced and ignored by our local, by our county, by our state, and now, once again, by our federal government.
And Lori, I'd like to ask you, because I've always made the point when I cover these things to the audience, don't think this only affects East Palestine. Because
No.
if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, it's coming to a town near you. And we're now 2 years later,
Yes.
Lori. Since that, we've had chemical plants exploding in the Midwest.
Yes.
In September,
Yes.
Conyers, Georgia, there was a chemical plant unleashed chlorine gas into the air. Again,
Yeah.
EPA says everything's fine, come home. I'm getting messages as far as Alabama residents telling me we're sick. Now we have in Northern California, we'll be covering it this week on the ground, a massive lithium plant fire. People are sick, nosebleeds, headaches, metallic taste in the mouth. We know in Piqua, Ohio, they've had intentional burning of lithium batteries, and it all seems to have the same exact script. The EPA, it's not just the EPA, I mean, the local health department, politicians, somehow everything's fine and you could come home if you were evacuated. There seems to be a playbook being used everywhere. And in this case, I have never seen any company settle this quickly. Norfolk Southern settled in a little over a year.
Yes.
I mean, it was chump change for them, 600 million.
It
But
was
I'd
their
like to ask you,
insurance payoff.
Yeah.
it was their insurance
payoff.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you, like, obviously your focus is on your husband and your immediate family, but why to broader America, I don't think people realize we're becoming a massive corporate sacrifice zone.
We're like one big petri dish in this country anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, let's blow it up and see what happens to the people, you know, and they can do all the health studies they want. Okay, that's great. That's wonderful. That's fine. But if you don't back those studies up with, you know, real information and accurate information and true test results, what good are the studies?
Why
They're not
leave
gonna
people
prove
in
anything.
homes? Yeah, why leave people in areas that they're having health symptoms? Why not remove them and then study them? I mean,
I
it's
would
not
invite them.
rocket science for us to tell you what you need to do to help us. And it's very sad.
I would invite them to come to my property, very small area. We lost a tree branch off of a tree last summer. Our neighbor down the road, who has a wood burner in his shop, took the bigger part of the tree branch. He called me and said, "Oh my God, your tree is contaminated." He put a piece of wood in his wood burner. He immediately got sick. He got dizzy. He had to leave the shop. He ended up with a bloody nose. He was sick for 2 days, and then his cats got sick.
Wow.
So this is a year and a half after. A year and a half after, and my trees are still contaminated. And I know people thought I was weird because I said about the mice. Okay. I live in an old farmhouse. I have woods behind my home. We caught a plethora of mice in 26 years. The derailment happened. It was a year before we caught 2 mice. An entire year. This year so far, I've caught 1 this winter. 1 mouse. It's going to affect them first. They're on the ground, in the ground. And, you know, it's going to affect them first. And people say, "Oh, she's crazy. She's crazy." Well, to me, that's just common sense.
Well, you often learn about contamination and illness from the animals first.
Yes. Yes. But they don't want to hear about that. Where are the bodies? I said, "Well, I don't go out and look for the dead mice. I'm sorry, you know, but I know how many mice I've caught in my home. I've lived here. You don't live here. Chrissy doesn't live here, but I do. And I've lived here for a quarter of a century.
Mhm.
I think I know my home."
If you two will allow me to, I just want to bring somebody else on for a few minutes because there is news today. There's been a new lawsuit that's been filed against Norfolk Southern. As I've covered recently, well, last year, there was a settlement. I believe that there was very suspicious decisions and activity with the lawyers representing plaintiffs in East Palestine and elsewhere. Those lawyers, their tunes seem to change very quickly from this, there's serious health issues here to there's nothing to see here. They got, I believe, nearly $200 million of the nearly $600 million settlement. They also, as a expert, decided to put forth a former chemical industry attorney. What was his? I forget his name.
The doctor, Chip Carson.
Yeah, Chip Carson, who used to be an expert for Exxon and Enbridge and Dow Chemical. With his expertise, having never actually been to East Palestine, by the way, to say there's going to be no health problems in the future. Anyway, that settlement went through. There is an appeal being efforted, but outside of that, there has now been a new lawsuit waged. So far, it seems that there are quite a lot of residents have signed on, and this is against Norfolk Southern and other defendants, and it is claiming wrongful death, which is key. So let me bring on now Christina Baer. Am I pronouncing your name correct, Christina?
That's right.
You're a trial attorney. You were in the area, I believe, a few weeks ago, doing a community meeting, talking to residents. I haven't met you yet, but I did watch some of that. And tell me what distinguishes this lawsuit from what I just described, which was the massive class action. Norfolk Southern settled for $600 million. From what we know, it was already that's their insurance policy. And underneath the hood of that settlement, there's not like universal health care for residents. Residents, if they had to fork back over their reimbursement if they stayed at hotels. Tell us about your lawsuit, who you're representing, and who you're going after.
Well, Can you hear me? Everything is different because class action lawyers don't report to the people. They don't represent the people.
Yes,
and y'all can hear me, right? So class action lawyers don't represent the people. They represent a class. And so really they just report to themselves. And nothing against class action lawyers, but I'm not one. I'm not a class action lawyer. I'm not a mass tort lawyer. I'm not even a personal injury lawyer. I am a community safety lawyer, and I'm called into communities that are really hurting. And when they ask for help, I show up. So this community called me in December. I showed up, I listened, I cared, I met Chrissy and others, and I started hearing their stories, and I started to build a legal team to take this on because this matters. And the class action, as you know, was not enough. Imagine 400 million ended up with the people divided by 55,000. That's nothing. These people lost their livelihoods. They lost their homes. They were uprooted. They had special needs kids that had to, go without therapy, right? Kids are regressing in their developmental milestones. You just talked about the hormonal issues, and the class action wasn't enough.
And can I ask you, because your lawsuit also specifically alleges wrongful death, can you tell us as much as you could tell us about that?
Whatever is happening in your life, when you throw toxins at it, it's going to get worse, right? So whatever people had going on in their life, this put them over the edge. We have a family that had many, many healthy children, 9, and then they have a miscarriage, and then they have a baby that dies at a week old. They actually had 2 miscarriages in there after the derailment. That's not normal, right? But you also just have someone who's 65 and has respiratory issues, and you put someone with respiratory issues in a toxic house. And that happened to everybody. So it's not surprising that our case has 7 wrongful deaths. I mean, we represent 744 people. This was a community that was rocked, as you know, and I know I'm just preaching to the choir, but it affected their health for everybody. And one thing that I'm struck by is the effect on the brain, as I'm sure you've heard residents tell you, but I have not met a resident who didn't feel brain fog, memory loss, confusion, feeling like you've been hit by a truck. And what we know about toxins is that they attack the brain and they cause physiological changes in the brain. You can look at brain scans and see the physiological changes. But you know what else causes physiological changes in the brain? Trauma. And so you have a double brain injury for these people. You have the brain injury from the exposure and then a brain injury from the trauma. And it's a recipe for disaster, and people are really hurting. You know, the law needs to do 2 things. One, or a case. One is to compensate people. That's important. But the other important aspect of the law and purpose of tort law is deterrence, to make sure it doesn't happen again. And the two have to go hand in hand. You have to compensate enough to have a deterrent effect. And as Chrissy said, this was just insurance, right? This was just insurance money. This was nothing. Last year, they had 51.3 billion in revenue. Maybe it was 53.1.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, it was 13. It was 13.1. Anyway, the point is they're making billions of dollars, and this was nothing for them. And
Right.
that doesn't have a deterrent effect. And we need to bring them to account to make sure it doesn't happen.
I'd like to ask you, you know, obviously you're not a chemist or anything like that, but you have to learn things for these kind of lawsuits. Something that has struck me, and this is not just with East Palestine, I've covered Flint for almost a decade. In the first lawsuit, the class action attorneys, who you've already pointed out the problems with, they went to an expert to do the testing. His name was Stephen Petty. He was like an expert chemical engineer brought in for many chemical contaminations. So those are the attorneys hired this guy. And then it seems they gagged him. There was essentially a gag order put that he could not release his data on air, water, soil. So this settlement, not your case, but the $600 million was only based on the EPA's data. And as I have reported over and over, the EPA's data is flawed. The EPA itself, officials have said that their testing equipment was not equipped to detect all levels of contamination. So I'd like to ask you, obviously your case is different than the 600 million settlement, but it seems like courts have been making decisions based on the EPA's data claiming everything's fine. Do you believe everything is fine in terms of the data they has presented? And will you be making that case in your lawsuit that independent testing has shown far higher levels of contamination?
Independent testing has shown far levels of contamination for sure. But let's look at who was entrusted to do the testing. You sent the railroad in to manage the testing. The testers reported for much of it to the railroad. That is like sending a criminal in to the crime scene to test for prints. That's not the way we do this. But the thing is, Jordan, it's the way the EPA does it. They all the time, they just come in and they trust whoever the wrongdoer is to do the test and tell them, what? It's all within acceptable limits. They love this phrase, acceptable limits. It's all within acceptable limits. And so when this derailment happened, I was litigating the big case in Hawaii against the United States for contaminating the water with jet fuel. And same thing, the EPA trusted the Navy to do the testing. Well, guess what? The EPA, the Navy and the EPA didn't test for fuel. They tested for total organic compounds. And then they told people that there was non-detects. They had non-detects. So everybody thought that they had non-detects. Well, think about that, right? They're getting, it's not just that they're not getting the testing information about what's in the tests. It's that they're being assured that it's safe. And that is the problem I have. I mean, I have a problem with the lack of transparency. People need to know what they were exposed to. But at the very least, Jordan, don't tell people it's safe. You
Right.
know, it's not, clearly it's not safe.
Right.
And do not hire an expert to look at sick people and tell them that they're not sick.
Before I let
I have a problem with that. And that is what the bad guys and the lawyers on the bad side, and I'm calling it the bad side. The lawyers on the bad side, that's what they do always. Every environmental disaster. They come in and they hire someone to say, and follow my logic, Jordan. They say, there's not enough X to make people sick. Whatever X is, insert X here, right? It's within acceptable limits. It was always within acceptable limits. And therefore, people who think that they're sick are tragically psychosomatic, right? That's what they came to court and said in Hawaii. We had 3,000 people who had acute medical symptoms like vomiting and diarrhea. Literally, they had the audacity to come in and tell the federal judge that that was all psychosomatic. And that's what they're doing here. It's very upsetting to me, and it cannot continue. And that's why we filed claims against the EPA and the CDC to call them to account for this exact kind of conduct. You can't come in, test for the wrong things, or have bad equipment that fails, and then tell people it's safe. Right. That is a violation of your own rules. And to be very clear, we're not accusing them of intentional conduct because that would not be covered by the FTCA. The Federal Tort Claims Act allows people who have been harmed by the negligence of federal officers to bring claims against the United States for the harm. It's a beautiful thing. I think it's patriotic to bring these claims. I used to represent the United States, and it was an honor. And people who've been harmed by the negligence of the United States have a right to compensation. But remember that the compensation is really for the purpose of deterring the bad acts. In this case, these 744 people are standing up and saying, not on my watch, not on my watch. You cannot do this again. It's not going to be this community. It's not going to be the next community. We are going to speak out, and we're going to take a stand so that we protect the families who come behind us. They're speaking, you know, Chrissy is one of our clients in those federal claims, and she's taking a stand for all of us, right? They're taking a stand for all of us.
And before I let you go, I want the residents to be able to speak. If you guys have any questions or comments for her, have at it.
I just like to thank all the attorneys that have stepped up and worked well together, and for truly to stop this from happening again, because none of us have a time machine. We cannot go back into time, no matter how much we would want to. We can't. So the only thing moving forward is to prevent this from happening to other communities again. So I would like to thank all of them involved for your heart and dedication to help stop this.
And Christina, I hope you don't mind me just being direct and blunt. It's kind of a problem I have. But obviously, a lot of residents are cynical of lawyers now because of their experience in the past.
Me too.
So what's your pitch to folks so that they could know you're not just another bullshit artist who seems nice, who seems genuine, but you know, when the quick, easy payout is there, you might change your tune.
So I am them. That's how I started my firm. My firm's called Just Well, because when I was sick, I just wanted to be well. and justice. It's about justice and wellness. But I started this law firm to help other families who were like mine. So when I show up, these are my friends. These are people like me. I don't sit on a hill and look down at the masses and think, oh, they're a little crazy. Like I think some lawyers do that because maybe in a prior life I might have done that. But now I had that same brain damage. And what I lost in brain capacity, I gained in empathy. And I have this, I call it a sad superpower to connect to communities. And what Chrissy said is, you know, people are uniting. This, the bad guys want to divide the community. And these 744 people, they come from different backgrounds. They come with different personalities, but and some of them were represented by other counsel who are also coming with us. And we're saying we are going to take a united stand because we don't want this to happen again. And so I'm really proud of the Keenan Law Firm and Bressman Law who are joining me on my team. And Don Keenan will be the lead trial lawyer in the case. I'm very proud of them. And I'm very proud of all the clients who stood up and said, not again, not now. Not
And
us.
for residents in East Palestine and Pennsylvania, how can they find out more? Because I'm assuming you're still looking for potentially more plaintiffs. And also, does this apply also for people that opted in to the previous lawsuit?
We represented people who opted in as well, because they still have claims against companies that had not released, that were not covered by the release. So if a company was not named in the release, then the release is not valid against them. So they still have claims, but they also still had claims against the EPA and the CDC. We feel really strongly about that. So we came in and we wanted to help everyone. I mean, we came for a few families who called us, and I thought I was just going to represent 10. But as we started and talked to more and more people, Lori knows, people came, right? And we did Facebook town halls and we started building a movement. And Jordan, I am really sorry to say that we are not taking any more claims because it's too risky. Today was the 2-year mark, which was the statute of limitations. So I wish I had come earlier. I wish I had been invited earlier, but I had 6 weeks. We did what we could. We were up until midnight. We manned every phone. I came 5 times in 6 weeks with my partner, Mindy Bish, and we just left it all in the field, making sure we didn't leave anyone behind. So,
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you so
can
much.
Follow along.
Yeah, we'll definitely be in touch to talk, a little bit longer. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
So I want to get back, Lori, to now Vice President Vance, because I think it's pretty important when, people were open-minded, potentially excited at the thought of him entering office. This area in East Palestine, Western Pennsylvania, a lot of them voted for Trump and him. Well, I've already shown you 2 clips, not so much talking about health problems. We haven't even mentioned, the National Transportation Board, their investigation basically found that Norfolk Southern intentionally, unnecessarily blew up these cars. So they didn't have to do it. It was all a lie that they had to blow up these cars. So I want to kind of, if we can, Colin, show the evolution of JD Vance, because I have some MAGA people asking me, what did he lie about? Well, I'm about to show you, MAGA. So Colin, if we could start, this was a year ago when Lewis, who was our reporter at the time, Lewis had gone there to East Palestine 5 times. Status Coup has been there 8 times in total. And Lewis confronted JD Vance and asked, when he was a senator, said, hey, evidence is coming out that Norfolk Southern kind of knew the cars were cooling. You didn't need to blow up the cars, because the derailment itself, let's be clear. Yes, some people got sick from the derailment, but the derailment did not cause the mass illness here. The chemical burning, the chemical detonation is what has caused So when you see media headlines, second anniversary of derailment, derailment was the inciting incident. The chemical burn was the chemical cancerous petri dish. So that you could do a Railroad Regulation Act. I'm for it. But the Railroad Regulation Act doesn't change the fact the EPA allowed Norfolk Southern to blow up 1 million pounds of toxic cancerous gas over a very concentrated area. So I want to first show Lewis asked a year ago, what's it going to take, Senator Vance, to call for a criminal investigation into Norfolk Southern? Let's see that.
Do you think anyone should be held as criminally liable for the decision to detonate those cars? A resident I've been speaking with said that they spoke with the former Vice President Al Gore at one point, who thinks that something could be criminal there. But the ultimate decision to detonate the cars seems like it was unnecessary.
Well, the NTSB report is going to come out soon. One thing I'd say, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is it's really important that we not have a federal settlement with Norfolk Southern before the NTSB report. It's like, why would you try to memory hole and prevent discovery on an accident before you even have the accident report?
Right.
Look, we'll see what the NTSB report says. My strong suspicion is there were a lot of mistakes. Whether they're criminal mistakes, I got to see more evidence before I can say that. See you guys.
Thank you.
All right. That was last February. The year anniversary. Says, well, let's see the NTSB report. Okay, fine. So, a couple months later, the NTSB report came out. In fact, the NTSB chair came to the Senate, and there was a hearing, and told JD Vance the following. Our investigation found, by the way, they knew this before the NTSB because the owner of the chemicals on the train testified that they had warned the chemical company told Norfolk Southern repeatedly the temperatures on the rail cars are cooling. There is no risk that they're going to explode. You don't need to blow up these cars. Please don't blow up these cars. They repeatedly warned them over 3 days between the derailment and the controlled burn. Well, Vice President Vance said, let's wait for the NTSB report. Okay, NTSB report, the NTSB chair told them the temperature on the cars were cooling. There was no risk of an uncontrolled explosion. Norfolk Southern was repeatedly warned not to blow up the cars. And this is, I believe, criminal. Norfolk Southern withheld this information from the fire chief and the governor of Ohio. So when the governor of Ohio and the fire chief kind of gave their sign off, because let's stop pretending the local fire chief was the one that got the last decision here. When the governor of Ohio said, fine, blow up the cars, Norfolk Southern withheld the kind of crucial information that the owners of the chemical company are telling us there is no need to do that. They withheld the information that the temperatures of the cars were all cooling, meaning there's no risk that they're going to blow up. What did JD Vance say when there was the NTSB findings? Let's play that, Colin.
This is an extraordinary finding. We were told effectively that there were two bad options, the controlled burn or the uncontrolled explosion. And it seems, based on the data that we have, that there was not a ton of reason to do the uncontrolled burn. And that, of course, is what spread toxic chemicals all over this community and the surrounding region. It's really an extraordinary finding. It goes to highlight the importance of your work. But I also have to note that residents on the ground talk about the fact that immediately after the uncontrolled burn, they moved the tank cars and train traffic was moving through their town and moving through their community. My line of questioning, I just want to be clear here, is not a criticism of the incident commander or of the governor. I think it's a criticism of the people on the ground who provided inadequate information. And provided inadequate information, I think, to the great detriment of the community on the ground. This is extraordinary work by your team, but this is a really, really troubling set of circumstances. This town very well may have been poisoned to facilitate the rapid movement of freight, or at the very least, it was poisoned for reasons that we can't identify. That should really concern every single person on this committee.
So, Lori, you know, as a resident who's husband tragically now has cancer. You've had your own health problems. When you hear the kind senator there say, it sure seems like this town might have been poisoned to reopen the trains quicker. I don't know. In America, I'm pretty sure there are laws that if you intentionally, nefariously endanger people by poisoning them, you might be charged with crimes. So, I reached out to his office, not once, I reached out like 5 times. I say, hey, the senator told my colleague he needed the results from the NTSB report. Well, now that the NTSB chair has told you they intentionally nuked the town, are you going to call for criminal investigation? This just so happened to be at the time he was politically prostituting himself to be selected as Donald Trump's vice president. What do you know? I got no response on that. He did not call for a criminal investigation. So finally, I want to show you what he said today so we could do the full evolution. So first was Senator Vance. I need to see the findings of the investigation. Then he said, it seems like this town was intentionally poisoned to open up the tracks quicker, yet he wouldn't call for criminal investigation. Let's hear what he said today, specifically about Norfolk Southern.
Much as I'm inspired and gratified by the resiliency of this community, I heard a lot about Norfolk Southern making promises to this community that it didn't keep. And you can be damn sure that over the next 6 months, you're going to hear a lot from the Vice President of the United States and the entire administration. If Norfolk Southern doesn't keep these promises, we are going to talk about it and we are going to fight for it.
So, Lori, does that comfort you that Vance, who basically acknowledged they intentionally poisoned you, yet won't call for anything really to be done, that he and Trump are going to take it to Norfolk Southern?
They're going to talk about it. We've been talking for 2 years. They haven't done anything. So what happened to, I go back to what I said before. Every anniversary, last year, this year, it's the same thing. We all hear from all of these news outlets. They come into town, they do a photo op, they leave. And this government is no different. He came in today. It was no different than when Biden came here. President Biden came to Darlington Township. I was told because it was not the township's event, as a resident, I couldn't attend. So what did Vance do? He comes in, he's got, the government people there, the fire department, all those people there, Governor DeWine, and if Norfolk Southern doesn't do this, we're going to talk about it. I talked to my children when they were, in trouble. This is a multi-billion-dollar company that has poisoned a huge number of people, animals, humans, homes, and we're going to talk to them?
Well,
No.
Again, maybe I'm in the twilight zone. And I want to be clear. JD Vance, as a senator, really only had the chance, really only had the opportunity on a microphone. All he could have done is called for a criminal investigation. He wouldn't even do that. So when he had the ability to at least use his perch as an Ohio senator, I'm not even saying criminal charges. I'm saying an investigation.
Yes.
He wouldn't do that. So now he's vice president. Really what he said is, if Norfolk Southern, we're going to spank them if they don't do what? Well, what about the fact that there is evidence? Let me repeat. I don't care if you're a liberal or a Republican. We should all care about this. There is evidence that a multi-billion-dollar company intentionally chemically nuked the deindustrialized Midwest, not just East Palestine. We're talking Pennsylvania. That plume, as I've explained over and over, and toxicologists have explained, went as far as 8 different states. When this happened, I was getting emails from Maine, about stuff coming out of the sky and people being symptomatic. So isn't the time for talking over? Shouldn't there be some type of, and I'm talking about the Ohio Attorney General, I'm talking about the Pennsylvania Attorney General. Let's not let Josh Shapiro off the hook, because after this, he talked about, we're going to do a criminal referral into
Yes.
Norfolk Southern. Well, that was 2 years ago. What happened with that? Because you've had the owner of the chemical cars say, we advise Norfolk Southern not once, not twice, 3 times not to blow up the cars. You have experts saying the temperatures of the cars were cooling. There's something called criminal negligence. There's something called criminal recklessness. So I just find it, and this is why a lot of people don't like me on the internet, because I don't join a team. I don't join the blue team, and I don't join the red team. I tell you, you're all being conned. And sadly, for the people of East Palestine who might have voted for Trump and Vance, maybe you were expecting something different. Am I missing something? Because I didn't see him mention the health problems. And as we're going to show, he dodged on issuing a disaster declaration. So am I being dramatic, or was this a lot of bullshit, what he said today?
It was a lot of bullshit. Simple as that. Simple as that.
Let's play another clip from our vice president.
The first and most important and concrete promise is that we're going to be transparent as the cleanup proceeds. Now, I remember talking to the Biden administration when I was a junior United States Senator, and I would say, well, when is the cleanup going to be done? And they'd give me a date. And then I'd call a couple of weeks after that date, and I'd say, well, is the cleanup done? And they'd say, no, it's going to take another few months. And so I'd call a few months later. Is the cleanup done? We're going to be honest and open with the people of East Palestine about this cleanup as it proceeds apace. I'm not saying everything is going to go perfect, because it never does, but we will always be honest and transparent with the people here. I think the second thing that we need to do, and we certainly commit to doing, is when you talk to people here on the ground, they know that this disaster left a mark on this community. They know also that to rebuild, you're going to have a government that's in it for the long haul, that's doing the long-term well testing, the long-term water testing, the long-term air testing, the long-term health testing. And that's something that we're going to fight to make sure that we do over the next few years of this administration. Because, again, to rebuild this community, and I think it's a beautiful place. It's got great workers. It's got incredible natural landscape. It's got great people. But people have to be confident that they can invest in a business here, that they can build a business here, that they can raise a family here. That's going to take the long-term commitment, I think, of the Environmental Protection Agency, but of the whole administration. And that's certainly something that people here should expect. And they'll have
more talk about confidence so that people could invest in businesses. Talked about health testing, but no mention of the fact that people are sick now.
Exactly.
I mean, I've talked to residents. The EPA has apparently been digging again at the derailment site. They started, I believe, in November or December of last year, so 2 months ago. And as they're digging at the derailment site, I don't know what they're digging. If they say it's all clean now, people's symptoms are getting worse. You want to know why? Because there's contamination in the soil. So when you're digging up the soil, you're releasing, whether it's vinyl chloride or whatever else, it's being released into the air. And when you have rain, when you have different wind patterns, people are breathing that in. So it just seems to me that there's a lot of minimizing and whitewashing where, we have to fight for further testing. Well, what about the acute issue now? It's chronic at this point, but people are getting their symptoms are being re-aggravated as they continually dig.
Yes, that I completely agree with that. And we've heard how, they have everything's almost done. Then they find a pocket of vinyl chloride. Then they find, the wetlands were contaminated. We already knew that. People who have a brain, any common sense, any high school science education will know that what they did destroyed the ground in this area. It destroyed it. it's going to destroy the water. If you don't have it in your water yet, it's coming. Just be patient. It'll get to you.
And I want to play one or two more clips, and then I'll let you go, because
Okay.
I think the next clip, I think it's the disaster declaration one, clearly shows, and I understand it. I'm not talking down to residents. I totally understand why you got to hope. I mean, Flint residents were really hopeful when Gretchen Whitmer was elected governor, because anything could be better than the governor, Rick Snyder, that poisoned you.
Right.
And Governor Whitmer ran on justice for Flint. She ran on reopening the water stations that the previous governor had closed down, and then she failed them. But it's totally understandable that people would have hope that Trump and Vance coming in. And, devil's advocates say, well, Jordan, they've only been in for 2 weeks. Well, here was his first opportunity to make some concrete promises.
That's right.
Let's see what he had to say. I don't know what the next clip is. Let's see.
In speaking with residents here over the past 2 years, one of the things that they tell us, the News Nation, is that they want a federal disaster declaration so that federal funds can come in so that they can get Medicare and they can get long-term health monitoring. I know the previous governor, the governor has asked for this. When I spoke with you last year, you asked President Biden to sign this. Will the Trump administration declare a disaster here so people can get these resources that they need?
Yeah, so the long-term health monitoring, by the way, is something that we're very focused on, and I'm personally very focused on. It's something my Senate office worked a great deal on, and frankly was very disappointed that the Biden administration wasn't willing to meet us halfway there. We're going to do a lot there, and I think there's a lot that could be done. On the disaster declaration, it's an interesting question, because a disaster declaration may have been very helpful 18 months ago. I don't know that it's still helpful today. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the governor behind me. I'm going to talk to Lee about this, and I'm going to say, is a disaster declaration still helpful? Because if the answer is yes, then I'm going to take that message back to Washington. But the answer may well be no, right? Because we're not in the same phase of this thing now that we were 2 years ago. Thank God for that. We're going to do right by the community. That answer may not be the same as it was 18 months ago, but we're still going to work.
Maybe I'm not a good student, but if you as a senator 6 months ago called for a disaster declaration, why do you now 6 months later as the vice president need to ask behind you if you still need a disaster? Why did you say it needs a disaster 6 months ago, but now? That's an interesting question. I have never heard a more bullshit statement by a politician. It's not an interesting statement. And I think this, Lori, I'd love your thoughts, is kind of the playbook from the media when he says 2 years later we're in a much different space. Actually, you might be even in a worse space 2 years later. He's making it seem like it's not a disaster anymore, and that's what the media regurgitates. But how can it not be a disaster if people are getting cancers? People still have bloody noses. I've talked to residents who are pooping blood. I've talked to residents with anal bleeding. I've talked to residents who are having seizures at the age of 18. And to be clear, these are people who were pretty much healthy before all this. Yes. I've talked, Colin. I don't know if you have it in order. Can we play that clip? It was on the porch. Me standing on the porch a couple months ago with those residents talking about the early puberty in children.
But still, we have to make it work with the mistakes that they did, and no one's willing to test in my home. I have to do it myself. My house has formaldehyde above the allowed limits to live in, vinyl chloride inside and outside, and we're still waiting on anything to happen. People are still getting sick. We have kids that are going through puberty issues with hormones. They're getting acne at age 6.
And the puberty issues are coming years before puberty would normally start.
I'm not a doctor. Keep that straight. I'm not a doctor. I've talked to people. I do know from having a family member that did go through early puberty. Now, it is very uncommon for a whole town and surrounding areas to have kids around the age 6, 7, and 8 to have hormones to produce puberty.
I suffered through severe heart failure. My wife has high blood pressure. My one stepdaughter gets nosebleeds. And my 8-year-old, she's 9 now, but my 8-year-old daughter is one of the ones that Ashley was just talking about with going through puberty. at 8 years old.
Were you and your wife and your kids having these issues before the derailment detonation?
Absolutely not. We were perfectly fine. Since this has happened, I've been unable to work. Like I said, my wife, she had like stroke level high blood pressure. My heart, it grew to double the size. My ejection fraction went down to 16%.
To get too personal, but you mentioned your 8-year-old daughter is now developing puberty in terms of her a cycle, or?
She's had multiple. We actually just went to a doctor about a month ago or so. She actually had got an injection. She has to get every 3 months for a while just to pause it.
Sounds like a disaster to me. And to be clear, that was not 2 years ago. That was in October.
Yes.
4 months ago. And not to cry me a violin, but I just want you to hear it from me. I was inside Ashley's home. That was Ashley's home. I think we made it in her home for about 2 minutes before we both like, hey, I can't be in here anymore. It smells so bad. My eyes were irritated. So you would think moving outside to the porch would make it a little easier. Doing that interview on her porch, the chemicals outside smell. And
Yes.
I kind of felt, I've talked to many residents about this. I know you've had this. You kind of feel delirious. And after a while, like, did I have like 3 shots of tequila or something? That was me on the porch experiencing that. So imagine what these residents who are stuck there all the time. But it just seems to me, Lori, as I let you go, either these people are incompetent or they're just part of a mass corporate psychops to tell you all, hey, it's in your head, die quickly or die slowly, because this is not better 2 years later. And
No.
and we cover it not just on anniversaries. We've been there 8 times, but at a certain point, people lose hope because the Democrats failed you. Now the Republicans failed you. That was a whole lot of bullshit, what he just said. Well, that's an interesting question. It's not, it's a straightforward question. You're the vice president now. You said before you asked for a disaster declaration. Now you're saying, we don't know if it's still a disaster.
Yeah.
Your final thoughts.
I think that first of all, he should have talked to residents, because we know what's going on. We have nothing in this game except our lives. There's no financial, gifts or anything for us from Norfolk Southern, like they've given to other, government officials, to the town. I also think that when they talk about the medical health monitoring, who knows me better than my own doctor, who I've seen for 10, 15, 20 years. But yet they told our doctors in February of 2023 not to treat us, not to talk to us, not to discuss the train derailment or the chemicals with us at all. Who do you go to? Who do you go to? So, I think that it was just a complete waste of time for him to come to town, because again, the thing of it is, I think they just want us to die. It's not about dying slow or fast. Just die. Just die. They don't care. They don't care. They
Well,
sit in their ivory tower.
all I could say is I'm sorry for what you're going through.
Thank you.
I hope, I really do. I met your husband. I hope that this turns around for him. I know he's there, so I just want you to send a message that I'm a stubborn motherfucker. Unfortunately, this is not my first rodeo, and I'm going on a decade trying to get some justice for the people of Flint. And I know when you're in this as a resident, you're human, and you kind of get despondent and cynical and want to give up. I will not give up on all of your behalf. I can't make empty promises. I don't know if anything I'm doing is changing anything, but at the very least, I could help get your voices out there, not just on anniversaries, but you know, whenever we can, because I think why this stuff keeps happening, frankly, is the government and the media have normalized it.
Yes.
They have
Yes.
normalized the mass corporate / government poisoning of Americans, and then pretending it's not going on, pretending, oh, everything's fine, and allowing the folks to quickly die or slowly die.
agree. Yeah.
That's not normal. And frankly, if you're noticing, folks in the audience, it's happening almost every month now, whether it's a railroad, whether it's a chemical plant, now a lithium battery plant. There was another one over the weekend in Northern California. Like, we're talking mass infernos. And the government, the EPA and local officials want you to believe all those chemicals, they just stopped at the mile marker, a mile away. They didn't spread further, and we're not finding anything of concern. Meanwhile, the residents on the ground, same thing everywhere. The bloody noses, the headaches, the migraines, burning lungs. And you want to know what? Cancer, everyone's different. For some people from this stuff, you could get cancer very quickly. For others, 3 years.
Yes.
Flint is one of the fastest growing cancer clusters in America because with heavy metal poisoning, it takes years for that to worsen. So I don't want to, you know, I'm not a doctor, but these people, you guys are going to need care for a long time. So I'm sorry for what you're going through, and please keep me in the loop, you know, about you and your husband.
But thank you. Thank you for everything you've done. You have been wonderful. And you have been on top of this. Status Coup has been here since the beginning. And we cannot thank you guys enough for everything that you've reported for us. We appreciate you.
And by the way, to the residents watching, if you've called me, if you emailed me, I haven't responded. It's nothing personal. I unfortunately have a growing list of communities reaching out to me, and I do have to care for a child and pay attention to my wife from time to time. So, but I will stay on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I could keep talking, but there's a lot of new viewers here. Believe you know, we're up over 50,000 subscribers just this year. So there's a lot of new viewers who might know very little about this story. So while I have you, I want to show you more clips from the residents. This is our reporting over the years here. So while Vance sits there and says, oh, well, I don't know if we're going to declare it a disaster or not. Well, hear from the residents, because it's clearly a disaster. Colin, whatever order you have, let's play some of the other clips I put together of my interviews with folks. I think one of them is with Wayne and Lori, actually. You got the man you love going through this. You don't know what's going to happen. You got the federal government, the state government saying nothing to see here. You must be in emotional hell the last 18 months.
I hide it well. I can assure you.
You're like my mother, she hides.
That there were many times that we sat and had those hard conversations.
Oh God, yes.
And we both cried.
Yes.
And then to tell your children and your grandchildren, that was hard. It's been terrible. And then to wonder if your grandchildren coming to visit you, what are you doing to them?
Are we doing it?
Are we hurting them?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's so a gauntlet of so many emotions, and I don't show my emotions often because I try hard to keep a stoic face for my kids, my grandkids, for him.
She gets upset, I get mad.
Yeah.
Because I'm so frustrated.
Well, you're wearing a hat. I miss the America I grew up in.
You're daggone right.
I mean, I've been to the meetings. I've been to our township meetings. I can remember I went to the CDC meeting they had in East Palestine because they certainly didn't have any of those meetings here. So I went to all the meetings they had in East Palestine. And the day that the CDC said, well, yeah, we know that you've been exposed to vinyl chloride. We can't do anything about it, but we could treat your cancer you might get from it.
Do I get a lollipop with that statement?
I'm going to tell you something.
Well, first of all, they can do something about it. Number one, they could give you all free health care.
Right.
And they could get us the hell out of here.
Right.
You took the words out of my You could get us the hell out of here. That was Lori's husband, Wayne, who, if you missed in the beginning of the interview, her telling me, unfortunately, his double breast cancer, which is pretty fucking rare in men. It's 1 out of 880, I believe. His double breast cancer that he got diagnosed with a little over 2 months after they blew up the trains right over him in Pennsylvania, unfortunately has now spread to his bones and lymph nodes. So, yeah, I don't know the prognosis, but obviously that's not good. He was healthy before this. I want to play another clip. Colin, whatever one this is, it might be the couple with the woman who suddenly has dementia.
The train derailment is just upstream here. This creek is the one that was, tons of contaminants came right down here after the derailment, and we've seen sheen of, chemical sheen in here every single time we visited so far. And this is also kind of the beginning of the tunnel where this goes under several homes, including Chrissy's home.
When you see that, that's usually you can get chemicals off of that.
Oh,
look,
we're
right
getting
against
some
the
down
shovel.
here.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it did come off that.
Oh, yeah.
I see the black in there too. Let's see. I'll show you an example. We figured out like this black layer, it looks like a watermark, but when you dig at that, it usually is chemicals.
It blows my mind that these houses were built
it.
over this creek.
Yeah.
Like what? What?
I don't think I've seen that anywhere else.
No. No, like this house can't have a basement.
So that was showing the chemical contamination right under Chrissy's home. Chrissy was on with us before. That was the chemical contamination under her home last year. Yet Vance, in other clips, said we're a lot better now than we were 2 years ago. The creeks are still contaminated. Homes are still contaminated. Residents are still on their own dime. And these are not wealthy people. East Palestine is a pretty poor area, frankly. Working class, low income people. They've had to move, relocate, while in many cases still having to pay their mortgage on their home that they cannot safely live in. Norfolk Southern, it would be pennies to Norfolk Southern. And frankly, pennies to the government to permanently relocate any resident that wants to leave with their family. But why won't they do it? Why won't they do it? They don't want to set the precedent. They do not want to set the precedent. Because if you permanently relocate residents of East Palestine, well, some folks in Flint are going to be calling you. Some folks in Conyers, Georgia are going to be calling you. That chemical plant fire unleashed chlorine gas, sickening residents, some of whom are still sick. The residents in Northern California might be calling you. That lithium plant fire that just happened 2 or so weeks ago. They don't want to, the government and corporations do not want to create the precedent that they could actually help you, because that would become expensive if they had to do it for all the communities that they're sacrificing, which is a growing list. Thank you. Laura just mentioned Love Canal. I wish I could go on forever, but I got to go take care of my child. A couple public service announcements. Our Tina Desiree Berg, our colleague Tina Desiree Berg and John Farina are just getting to Northern California tonight. So they will be on the ground starting tonight/tomorrow, covering on the ground the aftermath of the lithium battery plant fire in Northern California. If you don't know about this, we've been covering it for a week or two. This affects all of us because this is in the salad bowl of America. This area in Northern California produces 70% of your vegetables. Artichokes, broccoli, celery, spinach. There's also a lot of fruit that is farmed here. Strawberries, blueberries, etc. This is also a marine sanctuary with a lot of endangered and rare species. This is a massive deal. And similar to East Palestine, the government, right at the beginning, the EPA told people after 24, 48 hours, come home for folks that evacuated. Everything's fine. A local health official we showed on camera said, yeah, we don't think it's prudent to test the soil because we don't know what we're looking for. Lithium battery, I interviewed a hazardous waste expert and former fire chief who said, with a lithium battery plant, that releases hydrogen fluoride, which is super fucking toxic. And the symptoms that residents have been having, bloody noses, headaches, burning in their lungs, metallic taste in their mouth, dizziness. Some people have coughed up blood, matches the effects you would get from hydrogen fluoride. Not to mention all the other things. By the way, when lithium batteries burn, it creates PFAS. Those are those forever chemicals that have been found in drinking water. Cancerous, miscarriages in women. So we are not just bloviating from the studio, we're going on the ground. It's expensive to do this kind of on-the-ground reporting. That's why the mainstream media doesn't want to do this. In addition to the fact that they don't give a shit. I got to pay Tina to be on the ground there for a couple days. I got to pay John to be on the ground there a couple days. I got to pay for John's flight. I got to pay for their gas to drive up there. And I got to pay, obviously, for the hotel's food. When I say I mean Status Coup. So if you value living, breathing, independent journalism on the ground in the United Sacrifice Zones of America, covering and exposing the corporate sacrifice zones, please support Status Coup for as low as $5 a month, unless you're expecting CNN to inform you about the poisoning coming to a town near you. StatusCoup.com/join. Please, I have not beyond begging. I'd much rather beg you than Norfolk Southern, which I will not do, or JP Morgan, Wall Street, United Healthcare, Pfizer. I will beg you, the people, to fund us way before I ever talk to a fucking corporate vulture like them. Please, this is not cheap. We have to grow. We have to grow. We're close to hiring another reporter, but I desperately need more funding. Please sign up, statuscoup.com/join. $5 a month. That's all I'm asking for. That's 16 cents a day. I appreciate everyone who signs up at higher levels. Statuscoup.com/join. You can be signed up at $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, or $179 annually. Thank you. Lori just signed up as a new member. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's see. Other super chat, humorous, $10. Maybe Canada will give us all campers a small piece of their woods to live in and survive. We could go there and claim refugee that we're running from a persecuted government and country. I do like Canada, even though Trump's trying to start a trade war with them. Donna, $5. Thank you, Donna. Sly Tendencies, $5. Woke isn't why your job underpays you. Trans people aren't why you can't get ahead. Undocumented workers aren't why the economy is bad. Much respect. Ding, ding, ding. I just did a whole video last week ranting on Trump and this nonsense woke bullshit. You are being conned if you think wokeness and DEI is the biggest problems in America. It's the corporations and the government that have been purchased by the corporations, including Trump and Vance, by the way. AR became a Status Coup member on YouTube. Thank you, AR. Laura became a Status Coup member on YouTube. Thank you, thank you. Like I said, Tina and John will hit the ground running tomorrow, I believe. I think they're just getting there tonight after a 4-hour drive from LA. Tina's in LA, so she's got to drive up 4 hours to get to Northern California. So please support us, statuscoup.com/join. We'll have more for you tomorrow. Thank you.